Now, amidst a ruckus over the Rafale deal, the transgender bill was reintroduced in the Lok Sabha today. The bill seeks equal rights for transgenders and has anti-discriminatory clauses which extends to education, healthcare and social security for the company. Now, the new bill also provides for transgender community members to self-attest their status as transgenders.
लंबे समय से संबंधित लोगों द्वारा और अनेक उनके संगठनों द्वारा एक कानून एक्ट बनाने का विषय मांग के रूप में सरकार के समक्ष आता रहा है और इस प्रकार का इस आशय का विषय सुप्रीम कोर्ट में भी गया था। सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने अप्रैल 2014 में एक निर्णय देकर के सरकार से अपेक्षा की कि इनके हित संरक्षण के लिए, इनको समाज की मुख्यधारा में लाने के लिए और इनके भले के लिए योजना बनाने हेतु कोई कानून बनाया जाए। तदनुसार भारत सरकार के सामाजिक न्याय और अधिकारिता मंत्रालय ने इस विषय पर प्रक्रियात्मक कार्रवाई करके एक विधेयक तैयार किया और वो संसद में प्रस्तुत किया गया है।
Is that instead of supplementing the constitutional rights of the transgender community, this bill actually supplants their rights and its flawed provisions defeat the very purpose of the legislation. I had pointed out these flaws before to the minister in my letter of January 2018. I once again urge him to withdraw his bill, to consult the transgender community and to introduce a robust and comprehensive legislation for our consideration. Madam Speaker, my party is prepared to support a constructive bill. We have in the past spoken for the rights of transgenders, but this bill is not it. And Madam, given the disturbance in the House, given that many are not participating, given the legitimate demand of my party for a JPC on Rafale, may I request that you defer consideration, that the minister will rethink his bill, look at these amendments and bring the issue back to the House where we can have a serious discussion and decision.
First is clause 3, 9 to 16 creates provision to protect transgender persons from discrimination and provide welfare schemes. In doing so, the bill provides for both self-perceived gender identity and a screening process to recognize the identity of transgender persons. These are the two pillars on which a transgender has to be identified. When it is said self-perceived gender identity, what that actually means? When the bill states that a person will be recognized as transgender on the basis of a certificate of identity issued through district screening committee, and that certificate will be proof of identity as transgender and confer rights under this bill, then it is very unclear what the term self-perceived gender identity entails and how it will be enforced. This is between clause 4 to clause 7.
A welfare board. We need a separate welfare board for the transgenders because this is the first time they're coming out and they need equal rights. We have welfare boards for everybody. So like Dr. Tharoor earlier said and Mehtabji talked about giving them equal rights, what we even need to ask is for a helpline for them, because this is one section of society which people even in power. Madam, I'm ashamed to share this information with you, but even in the police cases, there are several transgender cases where there are allegations that even police use their power to ill-treat them. So why can't we have a helpline for them? If women can get several rights which this August House has given, the transgender also deserves a redressal system where they will get help and they should get equal rights in every society. So a good helpline like we have had for our children and women, we must get one for them. Another thing is what even earlier Dr. Tharoor has talked about, punishment and abuse that has been given. This is a completely neglected section of society where even their families don't give them respect. So how more can we make it applicable is something we need to look
Right, joining us on the phone line for more updates on the story is my colleague Meenakshi Bhanja. Meenakshi, even as we speak right now, the Lok Sabha is discussing this transgender bill amidst a lot of sloganeering on the Rafale JPC demand. But could you just take us through the key provisions of this bill? There was a specific flashpoint with regards to the definition of the word transgender.
Well, that's correct. And as we are seeing the interjections, even from Shashi Tharoor, who broadly on principle is supportive of the bill, but he does feel that there are certain discrepancies which can be perhaps addressed. We have seen this bill being introduced in the wide-scale ruckus which is currently going on in the House. But very pertinent to mention here that this bill was originally introduced in Lok Sabha in August 2016 after having gained approval from the Union Cabinet. But even at that point in time, there were certain difficult areas in this bill which needed further redressal or addressing, and therefore it was sent back to the 31-member Standing Committee on Social Justice and Empowerment. And subsequent to that, again, the minister concerned has today presented it in the Lok Sabha, which again is seeing a lot of debate being raised pertaining to certain areas which according to the members feel still needs further fine-tuning. Now, a key revision, like you were referring to, that has been made in this bill was the definition of the word transgender. The earlier definition, neither wholly female nor wholly male, was found to be offensive by members of the Standing Committee, and therefore, in the current bill, it has been changed to include a person whose gender does not match with the gender assigned to that person at birth, and includes trans man or trans women, irrespective of whether that person has undergone sexual reassignment surgery or hormone therapy. So this is the key feature that this bill has introduced after having been vetted by the Standing Committee. But clearly the members, including Shashi Tharoor, are of the opinion that there are several other contentious core areas which need more deliberation.
Right, Meenakshi, do we have any information though on what the contentious issues are? Because as you were highlighting, the key issue really was the very definition of transgender. But now that these amendments have been moved, do we know any more details about this?
Well, first and the most significant amendment was pertaining to the definition of the word transgender. That has been revised in this particular latest bill that is being tabled. But clearly the members feel more needs to be done vis-a-vis civil rights that should be accorded to the transgender community.
Right. Meenakshi, stay with us. Joining us on the phone line is Akai Padmashali. You've seen this particular draft. There was a lot of contention over the issue transgender. Does this new amended bill address your concerns, or do you feel there's a lot to be desired?
I need to thank the parliamentarians for finally taking up the Transgender Protection Rights Bill. And this bill, I need to openly say that it was not a consultative democratic process of what the working class, non-English speaking transgender community was wanting. It was a one-sided bill. It was one agenda of the upper class elite section to take up this issue in that context. But the current bill, be it in the context of the self-identification mechanism, and we were against and we are against screening committee process, and that is contempt of the Supreme Court judgment. The self-identification mechanism is something who decides whose gender. Being the state cannot decide my gender identity. I decide my gender identity in that context. I think all the civil rights, the fundamental rights, the constitutional guaranteed rights should definitely, I think the whole demand of the movement was and is to implement the 2014, the Honorable Utmost Supreme Court judgment called the National Legal Services Authority of India's verdict to be implemented without any excuses. If that is in the bill, I think that supports the movement of transgender community in the country, and we claim that we are the largest democracy. Largest democracy cannot ignore the oppressed sections of society's voices. In that context, if the Supreme Court nullifies judgment is the bill, we are supporting the bill. If that is not there, we do not want to support this bill process.
But ma'am, we are given to understand that, I'm just reading out to you what are initial reports here, that the bill, it has changed the definition of transgender person. It was, of course, earlier somebody who is neither wholly female nor male, but now that particular thing has changed and is modified as a transgender as somebody whose gender does not match with the gender assigned at birth, and includes trans men, trans women, trans queers, and other socio-cultural identities. Would you say that that is more a holistic definition in that case?
See, changing the terminology from third gender to transgender will not make any sort of huge difference. The only concern is that how do you build a social morality? How do you build a society without non-discrimination itself? There are variety or the diversity or the fluidity of identity which is existing under the realm, under the umbrella of transgender category itself, which is a huge thing to accept. It's a huge thing to understand what is this transgender identity is concerned. Second thing is about the gender non-conforming people. It is not about the gender that you're assigned at the sex that you're born with. It's about the social, evil that we are still facing that amount of discrimination. How do you combat discrimination? And there is the court, that has been quoted about the human rights violations happens against us, be it from the state, be it from the Department of Police or police authorities. I think that has not been mentioned. And why so silent? See, getting my housing, education, employment, that should not be in the bill, because this is my 21st century and my constitution has guaranteed such rights that these rights should be accepted and the government should bring it to my door. I'm bringing this issue in the bill. I think that will not resolve the problem. But what is the problem of this entire movement? As a community, we are socially excluded. And what is the government response to that? There's so much of human rights violations against us. There are so much of fabricated cases, false cases against us, which has been filed in all, across police stations. And what is the justification for that? The third thing is about why government is so silent when it comes to the self-identification mechanism.
Right. Akai Padmashali, I'm so sorry to interrupt you there. I'm so sorry to interrupt you there. You're making some really valid points, and we will come back to you for your take on this very far-reaching bill. But we're completely out of time and I need to slip into a short break. But thank you so much for joining us with your views.